But do you recall the most famous reindeer of all?
Just
Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer had a very shiny nose, and if you ever saw it, you would even say it glows.
Hi, Ashley, and Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Blessed Yule, Happy Kwanzaa, or whatever you celebrate. You have an incredible best friend in Trent because we're going to do your natal chart today. And with that, I saw you have a birthday that just passed, so I'm going to touch on your solar return just slightly, the very tiniest bit, and I'm going to touch on some transits, kind of what I see, especially you might have been hearing a lot about the Great Conjunction, so I'm going to look at what that means specifically for you, and I'm really excited. So I'm not going to do too much introduction because I talk a lot, so some some notes to take, some to-do list notes is, get comfy, wear something comfortable, sit down, take this in bite-sized chunks. I am affirming right now that I'll have all my timestamps together, so that way you can click to where you want to go, and that way when you come back to watch this, you can jump to where you want to jump to in the video. So yeah, I think that does it. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm just going to kind of be walking my screen through the whole time. So definitely follow along, and then you can reach out to me and email me after this if you have any questions. And Merry, Merry, Merry Christmas. All right, let's get started. Okay, so I changed my cursor to be turquoise so you can follow along with me. I'm not much in a camera mood, so normally I have my camera on the whole time, but I've just got out of the hospital, but that is irrelevant. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about your birth chart and your overall personality, and really kind of get a sense of your gifts, your talents, and what you bring to the table, maybe what are some places you can improve upon, and how this is affecting your life right now, right? Because, birth charts are nice, but it's nice to hear about yourself, but, you want to know what to do with all that information that you have, so that we're going to talk about. So here we're going to talk about some of your baseline energy. So, sorry. All right, so you have, here is a aspect grid that takes these 7 elements into equation. So the actual 4 elements of all things within creation: earth, air, fire, water. But then also this is called a modality right here, this list, and there's cardinal, fixed, and mutable. I'm not sure how much astrology knowledge you know, so I won't dwell on any of these terms. But basically you're pretty balanced elementally. You have a pretty good head on your shoulders about when to be objective, when to be subjective, finding motivation, but also being able to be present and be okay with things in the moment. So you have a pretty balanced energy overall. You lean a little more towards air. So you do lean a little more towards socialization, collaboration with others, being objective, being logical, using your intellect and your wit and humor. So a lot of that is air quality stuff, as well as water, being able to tap into your emotions, being able to be empathic and feel the emotions of other people. To be able to go deep, right? Not everything's just surface level. That's one of the issues when you have a lot of air but low amount of water, is that you might be very superficial or shallow, or you can think very deeply but unable to feel deeply. But it seems like you can do both, which is great. You may find you have a hard time balancing those though, because you do have a good balance. So it just depends on what planetary energy is happening for you. So you may actually be a little less fixed in that way. Whereas here with the modalities, you're also pretty balanced with cardinal and fixed. So you can start things and stick with them, but you usually need help from other people. And this is kind of showing in your chart too. You like to surround yourself with a lot of intelligent people, a lot of philosophical people, a lot of older people, because people who can teach you things. I see this all like in the chart as I'm looking at it. So you may feel like you're unable or ill-equipped to complete things on your own, and you need that help, someone to bring in. So but you typically like to initiate, and you can be a leader, but you can also fall into line in an assembly style. But I think for you, you don't like the idea of playing just a support role in life. You're not a sheeple. So that's typically very common for people who have Jupiter on the ascendant too, which we'll get to. So overall, we got some pretty balanced energy. This is another grid here. It's showing all the glyphs of the planets. So right here, you're part of this generation that has Uranus out of bounds. So you could be a little rebellious. A lot of people who have Uranus out of bounds, this generation tends to defy their parents in one way or another. But other than that, you don't have anything out of declination. The Uranus is in the 8th, but it is in Sagittarius. So a lot of times this could just be you going against the grain of life, the life path or life patterns, karmic patterns of your family. So it may be that some people in your family have a certain patterns in the chart and you don't, and that's just because like you are freeing yourself from that karmic bond. So the Uranus does find a way to create new pathways within a family unit on a very spiritual level. So you may find that you are just maybe a black sheep in your family, which is very common. So, okay, so let's talk about your big three. So your big three are 3 points in everybody's chart that really surmises who you are, your energy, your points of mastery, where you're coming from, your evolutionary growth, and how people will see that during your lifetime. So you do have your rising in Gemini, which is the astrological sign of the twins. You have the sun in Scorpio, which is the scorpion glyph. And then you do have moon in Aquarius, which is the water bearer, which is an air sign, not a water sign. Again, don't know how much astrology you know, so I'm sorry if it seems like I'm just diluting things down. But you are very smart with a lot of air in your chart, so I'm sure that you're following me. Okay, so we've got Gemini Rising. So Gemini Rising is, with the rising sun in general, is two things. It's how you approach life and how you appear to others. Now, interesting thing, you've got a planet conjunct the ascendant, but for right now, I'm going to go ahead and just talk about Gemini as a rising sign. What does that mean? What does that mean for you? Well, it means that you are somebody that is always questioning and learning. You will appear youthful all of your life. You love to live life to the fullest. You are constantly alert and curious and adaptable, and you're somebody very open-minded. Gemini people are probably some of the most open-minded people, especially with moon in Aquarius. This is someone very open-minded to new experiences. This is somebody who's willing to break the chains of the past or drab, or the things that are no longer essential, or things that are essential but need to be like broken down and mended and changed and rebuilt. Okay, so like you're someone that's got a little bit of like a rebel or like revolutionary sort of energy happening in this chart. So it's not surprising that you're friends with Trent, because a lot of his planets fall here in your 7th. So Sagittarian people tend to be very philosophical, very stick it to the man type of sign. So this Gemini sign, though, is a little less, it's very much more effervescent and childlike. So you have a lot of enthusiasm, you learn very easily, and you can be very tactile with your hands. The only things I know about you are that you're not dating anybody and that you're an artist, which didn't surprise me with Mercury and Scorpio, but we'll get to that in a little bit. But you have many ideas, a lot of thoughts. So sometimes the negative of Gemini rising is that your thoughts can race. Okay, so it can be very, very hard for you to sort of pin it and get back to it. It's just, if you think of your brain like a bulletin board with Post-its and you're pinning stuff, it's just filled to the brim to where some of the Post-its are overlaying others and you can't read what's on them. It can be very hard for you to be organized. But you have the ability to, especially with a stellium in the 6th. It's just, if you've gotten good at organization, it's because you worked your little tail off to get there. but you could be articulate. You might be somebody that breaks the ice with a lot of humor with people. So you'll use your hands a lot when you talk. Typically, you probably have a hard time sitting still. You can like shift a lot and move a lot. But you're very friendly. So Gemini rising people are so friendly. They're the first people to say hi to you when you walk into the room. A lot of times Gemini rising people can be the nice person, the person that's happy and nice. Because just because you like to talk and you do like gossip, it doesn't mean that you're mean. Sometimes Gemini rising people can be very nice. But let's see. But you aren't somebody. Now, typically Gemini rising people don't respond to emotions that well. Like they'll be quick to want to try to solve the problem, or they'll be quick to try to redirect. But you do have the ruler of your ascendant, right, is Mercury. So you have Mercury sitting here and Scorpio in the 6th. So you probably are somebody that would respond to emotional situations by trying to like solve the problem, but it's not in a way where typical Gemini rising, air rising signs are like, I want to try to solve the problem because I want to get off that topic. Like I don't want to get deep because my mind races and I just can't, right? So your mind probably races, but not as much as maybe someone with Gemini with Mercury in a different sign. So again, it kind of helps to know, for astrologer to know how to look at the chart, because someone might say these things to you and you're like, well, not exactly. So, but you can become very distressed if you don't understand or comprehend something. So that is definitely something where there may be certain emotional issues that even though you have that propensity, that you still have a difficult time. But you definitely through life are trying to really strengthen the adaptability of Gemini, but also trying to at least get to a certain maintenance level with consistency and reliability. You're probably more reliable again than the typical Gemini rising because you have 2 fixed signs as your sun and moon. But overall, your expression and your gifts are of a quick mind and good with linguistics and good in social situations. And you have just enough air and adaptability to be able to relax, but also enough curiosity to be invested in things. So it's a really nice blend with Gemini people. So, and the plus is definitely looking young for a long time, because who doesn't want to look young most of their life, even into old age? Gemini rising people are blessed in that way. Okay, so let's get into now this Jupiter conjunct your ascendant. Okay, so this is any planets conjunct an angle like this. So the angle of the descendant, this is the IC, the Imun Koli. This is the descendant, which is like others you bring, or gifts from others you bring into your life, is the 7th house. Also, this is your marital partners, typically ruled here. And then the midheaven, which is like your career, your status, your ambitions. So Jupiter, so this is the only planet that is conjunct an angle in your chart, and it's retrograde. Okay, so at the time you were born, Jupiter had been going, but it was slowing down once it got to 1 degree Gemini, or it probably went a little bit further than this. But then right around the time you were born, or maybe a little before, it started to go backwards, back towards this Taurus energy. Now, when a planet's at like at the beginning or an end of a sign, it has an extra sort of potency to it. Now, when it's towards the earlier degrees of the sign, it's not quite formulated in the way that it would if it was at a later sign, or if it's at a critical degree, which is like 29 degrees or so, that there's more importance to work on this gift. So this is kind of a gift that's coming into your life on the ascendant. It's a really nice planet to have on the ascendant. So what this can do, Jupiter typically rules Sagittarius and Pisces in classical astrology. But if we're using modern, it's really, Jupiter really vibes with Sag. And this Jupiter will give your ascendant a little more of a Sagittarius flavor. Gemini and Sagittarius are also sister signs. So And it's so funny, my sister's a Gemini and I'm a Sagittarius, so it's always easy for me to remember that. So with Jupiter brings a boisterous, gregarious, larger than life energy. A lot of people I've talked to that have Jupiter conjunct their ascendant, their motto really is go big or go home. Now, the lucky thing for you is, and I don't know if it's lucky, but just this is bias for me to say this, but when a planet is within the first, so it's not in the 12th side of the house. See how this says 12 and then this says 1? So when it's in the first side of the house and it's this close to the ascendant, it's very, very apparent. Like everybody can see it. It's still apparent when it's in the 12th. It's just that you might not see it as much, or that people don't see it right away. But it's so close to your ascendant that it's almost a first house Jupiter. Even if this was at 2 degrees, I would count this Jupiter as a first house, but I'm counting it as a 12th house Jupiter, which gives you an extra little seed of spiritual awareness. It gives you an extra little seed of, conscious awareness. But it really does give you a dreamer aspect. So those thoughts don't just like rattle around endlessly. Like you might focus them more towards dreams and ambitions. But Jupiter on the first can also just give a sense of confidence and a jovial nature. This is somebody who typically wants to adventure a lot or go. And especially with Gemini. Gemini is kind of like a I can't sit still type of rising sign. So then when you have Jupiter there, Jupiter magnifies anything it touches. So like your happiness, bubbliness, brightness, like is just extra magnified. So with it being in the 12th, it puts just a little bit of a veil over it. So one issue that Sag rising or people who have like a strong Jupiter in an angular house or where it's really visible, one problem that happens there is that it can feel like the person's personality is too big, or like they don't have conscious awareness of like socially, like how they are in social situations. Like Sagittarius rising people usually have a hard time with this when they're kids. So you are probably somebody that a lot of people flock to want to feel better, because Jupiter is just a feel good kind of planet. So it's kind of nice. You probably attract a lot of people to you. A lot of people probably say you have a great smile, or like they love your laugh. Gemini rising people have a great laugh. But what also, Jupiter can be an ambitious fellow himself. So Jupiter people can want the world. And so you may expect a certain level of success for yourself. And it may come easily to you. But you tend to over exaggerate. Your perception can exaggerate itself. So that's one thing to be careful about with Jupiter, is how to rein that Jupiter Gemini energy in. And the best thing to do is to use the planet that rules your ascendant, the Mercury, in which is to focus it. Okay, so we'll kind of get into that. But that's kind of talking about your rising sign and, realistically what the rising sign is doing for you. Yeah, and real quick, let's talk about the Mars too, how that helps you. And I said trine like a dummy. I meant sextile. I'm not doing well today. So you have, again, this gives you more vitality, gives you more energy. Mars in Aries is already really energetic. And yours is focused outwardly, but this Jupiter is magnifying that even more. So you may have this strong confidence and ability to do anything. You might be the type of person's like, I'll try anything once. Or you may be someone who's insanely talented, because Gemini people can do this already, but you may be someone that's insanely talented to where you could try something once and get it pretty much the first time. Because again, the Gemini rising already is really good with learning. The Jupiter's just magnifying it and loves to learn. And then that Mars is like adding this little extra sense of like talent into the actual like doing of the work. But you'll typically make really good decisions in general in life, especially with like work, business, health decisions. You're probably pretty good when it comes to like competition or being competitive. you're not overly competitive. You got a healthy amount, but it is something that drives you. So you may compete with yourself a lot, like your own perception of perfectionism with the South Node in Virgo, which we'll talk about. But the point is that you have a really good um, gift of being able to break your own limitations, which is such a good gift. Like I wish I had that. So, but let's go ahead and talk about the Sun in Scorpio really quick, because I think that's also really important. So the funny thing about you, Ashley, is that you might hear a lot of people tell you in life, like, you're not who I expected you to be, or like, wow, once I got to know you, like, there's a lot about you that I didn't know, or like, you're so much deeper or so much more emotional than I expected, or I just, there's something about you that you seemed so one dimensional maybe, or you seemed like larger than life because of the Jupiter. But like it's nice to know there's this quiet side to you, or there's this deeper side to you, because the Sun in Scorpio is so emotionally complex. And as a tidbit, the Sun is what you're trying to master, but you do have Mercury here. And so that means that like you've possessed some of the Scorpio nature. You've been learning it from a young age. But to fully express and shine as a Scorpio is one of your life paths, one of your points of mastery. And your moon in Aquarius is kind of where you're coming from as a child. Okay, so you were probably less emotional as a child, and maybe more looked up to both or one of your parents, and wanted to be somebody that did a lot of things for other people. You might be someone that's can get stuck in this rut of wanting to service other people. The Gemini rising may interpret that as, oh, I should just make people laugh, or I should just show everybody a good time, or I should spark someone's mind or interest in learning things, and because that makes me happy, So like the moon in Aquarius becomes very focused as a child on other people around them, and finds emotions hard to understand and deal with. And that could be because your emotions have always been really intense. And so for you, that might be something to where this little darker side of you don't show a lot of people, and you try to find a way to focus it on work. Okay. So this Sun in Scorpio, we're trying to get to this point where you're fully able to express it to its full vitality of this private person, someone who is good with boundaries, because sometimes the Gemini rising can foolishly let people in that they shouldn't. So you've probably gotten quite good as you've gotten older of like judging people a little better instead of just trying to cater to everybody. But I wouldn't say that you're someone that was naive. The moon in Aquarius is not a naive, like, young person, child, adolescent. But you have strong intuition, and you're very artistic. So when I saw the chart, I didn't even know that you were an artist yet. I had to go back and ask. I said, hey, like, what is Ashley's job? He's like, well, she's an artist. I'm like, not surprising, because Mercury rules the hands. So a lot of people who have Mercury in a water sign tend to be painters or sculptors or musicians or something of that nature. But you have this really powerful need for deep emotional involvement. And so these planets are placed in the sixth house. And the sixth house deals a lot with your day-to-day routine, with work, or your day-to-day wellness. So it's difficult to say how that energy plays out in your life. I would say that it's probably a blend of your appearance and your health. Appearing like you've got it all together with the Venus in Libra, and you're likely very beautiful based on a lot of these I'm seeing. Like I would take it that you're a very, very beautiful person. So it may be like sort of this needing to keep it all together and be presentable, but it's also this like, I have to constantly better and better and better and better myself, because I have all these big dreams and these big ambitions. And like, also the Jupiter is retrograde, so a lot of that's focused inward. So I feel like intuitively something is telling me to tell you that like you may have this very passive underlying theme in your life of wanting to constantly better yourself. And, I truly feel like intuitively you're not searching for perfectionism, but that you are reaching this level where you're like, I hit a limitation, but it's not enough. So it's like improving just for the sake of improving. So that might be a pitfall you fall into. But you can become very possessive of these ideas, but you can also be very loyal to anything that you are setting out to achieve, especially because, again, we're talking about the cardinal fixed energy, which is these modalities are basically how you go about expressing yourself. How does your energy initiate? Do you need someone to initiate for you, or can you initiate on your own? So I think that this theme of improvement can also come from, well, it's better if I do it myself because other people may do it wrong. So at work, you may be someone that is hyper focused and focuses on getting things right. And even if things are going well, you might try to investigate things within the system that are wrong to try to fix them. So you might be somebody that's hyper vigilant, which can make you very tired and exhausted. But overall, this sun energy, what you're trying to master is doing things with passion and fervor, being really loyal and devoted to things, and learning to process your emotions in a healthy way. And so with the sun being in the sixth house, this is the house that deals with health, wellness, and work. So back in, older days, older time, yeah, I guess that makes sense. This used to be the house of, employees, but it used to be your house of servitude. And then even before that was a house of like slavery. So like this is like if you owned slaves, they were a sixth house thing. So sometimes when planets fall in the sixth house, this can be what we become slaves to. And a lot of times this is our jobs. So you may be someone that's very intensely loyal in any job that you do, or any passion or hobby that you do. You might become very, very, very invested. But yes, this can also mean that you make attachments quickly that you wish you wouldn't or haven't. So we'll get a little more into the sixth house in a little bit, but let's go ahead and jump over to the moon, because I feel the moon is very important. And I'm sorry, I'm pausing if you hear clicking, because I pause to do the timestamps, because I usually always forget. So okay, so with the moon in Aquarius, we're talking a lot about your emotional desires, your moods, how you were as a child, your role, feelings, and romance plays a big part in the moon too, just because the moon is also where we feel the most security in life. So if somebody can jive with your moon without challenging it too much, you tend to feel pretty safe and secure around that person. It's a hard balance, though. It's a hard balance because a lot of people need a little something on their moon to pique the interest. But with the moon in Aquarius, this is, we call this the detached child, which what the child is detached from is, it can differ, which we'll talk about that. But, typically you're someone that can turn your feelings on and off, right? So if something gets emotionally overwhelming, you're somebody that can be like, nope, and you can snap a finger and like not have to think about it. You might be somebody with the Venus trine here that's very good at like just coping naturally. You have no idea how big of a gift that is. But your family ties and attachments are not important to you in the way they are to a lot of people, especially because I'm looking here at the moon in the 10th, right? So this is, as I mentioned, the midheaven, and the 10th is like your status, your career, your ambitions, what you achieve in life with your own resources. Whereas the fourth house is what is given to you, where you come from, your origins, your family. So when people have planets in the 10th and no planets in the fourth, this is like similar to the Uranus I was saying earlier. It's like, I want to break away from like my family life, and I want to get away from that. That's not fulfilling for me. So you may find that you have some opposition with that, which we'll talk about. You might get some resistance from your family about who you are and how you express yourself. But ever since you were a child, you've had this just almost like laissez-faire attitude about family. That's not to say that you don't care, but just that you're like, hey, it's my life, right? So they're not as important to you. You are someone that's hyper focused on friendships and building those friendships. And you're certainly not somebody that like, while you can turn your emotions off, I think you're someone that can be very direct. I don't think you necessarily hide your emotions. I just think that you don't prioritize them the way that some others do. But you do like to service people a lot. You probably are somebody that'll take the shirt off your back for somebody else. But your sympathy, concern, your emotional reservoir is not like isolated to your family. And it's a very weird juxtaposition because we're going to talk about this in a second. Your moon does not get on with your sun. So this is I have this too. I have my moon not getting on with my sun as well in the square. And it makes it very, very hard to grow up. It makes it very hard to do the things that we need to do. And it makes it to where we only kind of do the things we want to do. And a lot of people who have this tend to struggle with it into their 30s. So you had your Saturn return a couple years ago, like 2 years ago. And so for you, it might not have been until that Saturn return happened at 0 degrees Capricorn where you kind of had a wake-up call, which could have been like, you basically got down to, gosh, I can't think of the phrase now, but it's like you hit rock bottom to have that breakthrough of like, okay, I need to do things that I need to do, not just the things I want to do, like putting friends before myself. But you don't do well with like big romantic gestures or big like proclamations of devotion or possessiveness or obsession. You don't really do well with that, but that is the type of energy that can come from the Scorpio. So it's very difficult for you to know when to obsess and when to let go. So that is something you probably do struggle with. But you're open for experimentation a lot. You're someone that likes to break traditions. So you tend to have a lot of interest in the public and what you can do for other people. And I think through your art that kind of shows. Your art tends to be, I'm coming back to this a lot in the central energy of the chart. This like art being a form of expression for you, but it's also very healing for you. But I think what the big thing we have to work on, the sun and moon is pointing out, is learning how to be okay with it not being perfect, but not detaching from something when it doesn't go the way you wanted it to go. But you're a very thoughtful person as well. So even though you were a detached child, doesn't mean that you were thoughtless or inconsiderate. Although that can sometimes happen, the Jupiter, all that stuff, the bigger than life energy, it can be hard to think of the little person sometimes when all that's going on. But I think the Venus does make it to where you are very thoughtful. So when the sun is in water, a water sign Scorpio, and you're coming from air, okay? So the moon was waxing at the time you were born. So you have this unconscious urge to push forward and constantly taking action. So I think if you're someone that sits still too long, you can actually, it could be very mentally draining or very emotional on you. People who have waxing moons that have periods of their life of a lot of strife where they feel like they're not moving anywhere or they feel stagnant, tends to bring on feelings of anxiety and depression. So you are a very, very determined person. And so when you're younger, you're probably a very independent thinker. You're probably a very good student. And you tend to have a lot of strong opinions and tend to be a strong leader. But you can sometimes, even though you're broad-minded, you can sometimes struggle with your own intolerance. And there's an inner struggle that happens there. So how to break away from this is being that strong leader and really pulling out that Scorpio intensity and focus. that will be a huge way for you to break out of that, this weird energy that's kind of holding you back sometimes. But if you let it get out of balance, it can stop you from accomplishing anything. And it can cause you to dig in your heels and just sit still. Um, so, and it's important too to not always just drop back and want to do your own thing. So while the art is very healing, I think the goal is to share it with the world. And we'll talk about that with your nodes as well. Mainly the soul lesson to get to the final point, it's to establish a long-term plan of accomplishment and to just stick with it, but allow some flexibility for divine adjustment, right? Because the universe is always going to like throw things your way that are going to make it difficult for you to follow things exactly to your plan. Um, but to, go to have those things that motivate you, whether it's a relationship or a humanitarian project. And it may be hard along the way for people to understand how you're allowing this energy to be at work. But if they, those that stick it out will see that you can be intense and passionate and fixed, but also be kind and gentle. And so, yeah, I feel like that is really a lot of what's happening with the moon sun. It was so important for me to drag that out. I'm sorry, but I wanted to get to that point because for me, this was a big breakthrough when, someone looked at my chart and was talking to me about the square. So it's this square of how we develop a long-term plan to where work is no longer just work. It's like actual career. I think that's a huge thing for you. Okay, so let's talk about the nodes really quick. So the nodes, these little guys here, this is the south node, also known as the dragon's tail. And this is the north node, also known as the dragon's head. So they are in feminine elements of earth and water, and they are mutable. Okay, so this is funny. Remember how I said you don't have a whole lot of mutable energy? So you actually have mutable energy in these nodes. And so the nodes are all about our destined point. So as you know, the head leads the body of the dragon and the tail follows. Okay, so now in like Vedic astrology, which is like, the Middle East style of astrology, they tend to have this idea of like, you should completely like try to shut down the south node energy because it's your karma from a past life. You've already achieved this. You've already mastered it or felt comfortable in this energy. So it's almost neglectful to try to like do too much of the south node or touch it or address it. And so we need to be doing north node because this is what we didn't do in a past life, or this is the karma we have to do in this life. I'd say that there are two sides of a coin, and that, just a majority of the time, this south node was the one that had its heads up, if you will. So now it's time to flip and put the tails up to where it's, you could say vice versa, to where, you're flipping the other side of that coin and allowing that expression to happen. So where you get comfortable, Ashley, is this sort of drive that you can tap into of like perfecting your form of self-expression. And I think a lot of that is through your art. And what we're supposed to be focusing on is this north node in Pisces. So the reason I pointed out the mutable is that I think in order for you to follow your destiny, right? Your destiny is to express this Pisces in the 11th house, which I'll get to what that is in a minute. But it being mutable means that you have to start letting people in a little bit and not just letting people in as you preconceived judge them, if you will, right? So like you may have this way of compartmentalizing things and even people. And so even though you're very friendly, very open, very tolerant, I think, the sun in Scorpio, the moon in Aquarius, those fixed signs tend to only let people close to them if they feel they're somehow worthy, or if they feel safe with them, or they feel they align with their thoughts and beliefs. Like fixed people can be like that, a little more rigid about actual closeness, right? So this mutable energy is saying like, allow people in, allow people to help you, allow yourself to give without expecting anything in return. I mean, there's a lot of different words and themes I'm going to play on for this, but how it resonates with you is going to be entirely personal. So when I'm thinking about, this in a sense, I'm thinking about, you know, grace and gratitude. So when we're talking about the South Node comfort, right? Like, so you're like, okay, what is this? Like, what is this comfort that you're talking about? Like, it's an archetype, really. So this could be that you're always the one that's playing the server or the worker, or always having to be humble, or always trying to put others before yourself. So you could be a bit OCD, definitely be very detail oriented. Um, what you need to sort of let go of is this need to be right all the time, hypervigilance. You can sometimes be a workaholic, be obsessive with perfectionism. You may overanalyze things. You may tap into the air a lot and be too logical. You could also sometimes be prone to sadness if you allow yourself to stay in that state for a long time, or just being judgmental. Okay. And that again comes from trust. That's a lot of what that comes from. But I think if you're able to let go of that South Node energy of, the Virgo there, right? You can start to free yourself from the chains that bind you a little bit. So you have to live your life with purpose, okay? So the North Node of Pisces is connecting to all things mystical, spiritual, and divine. And so really the goal with Pisces is to the North Node in the 11th house, which is groups and friends and communities and community service. Not so much, I mean, service is, it's a toss up, but basically we'll say community service, right? So letting go of needing to be perfect, letting go of control and rigidity, and letting go of a plan. So, right, this is what I was talking about, where like it's good to develop a plan and be a leader, but not expecting things to go perfect, right? Like just saying you're going to give it your best shot. Learning to meditate and connect with your ancestors and your guides. Like your family ancestral line can still help you, even though you're very much, well, I want to break away from that, right? I mean, it's still something that could really be, have quite a bit of purpose for you. And just letting go of so much structure. All right. So it is such a balance for you. And I know that can be frustrating because some charts don't have juxtapositions like this. But some traits that you should try to align yourself with a little bit more is being more intuitive, being more forgiving, being more artistic, like tapping into your art, but again, eliminating that need for it to be perfect, being introspective, charitable, generous, compassionate, adaptive. Okay, so again, since we have low mutable, you might have a hard time adapting to change. So I think that is the biggest thing that can help you. So your mission in life is to be a part of the group and to give intuitively and artistically and devotionally without like this need for everything to be spelled out, and to have confidence in yourself. Okay, so Ashley, the rest of the time we're spending this is I'm going to go over a couple other planets I didn't touch on as much because I talked about I didn't spell it out, but I was talking about your moon square sun for forever because that is just it's a really big aspect. It's a biggie. So what I'm going to do is touch on a couple of things that I didn't really get to. Some gifts, some areas of improvement, just some things I noticed. And then we'll kind of go to your soul return. You just had a birthday recently. Happy belated birthday. So we'll kind of look at what the yearly outlook looks like right now. And then I'll talk to you about like the grand conjunction and what I feel like that is also meaning for you. I think it's spelling a lot of good things for you just as a heads up tidbit. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at one thing that's really interesting, a gift that you have, is this Pluto and Mercury. They are conjunct. Now, the nice thing is that the Mercury is moving away from the Pluto. So those planets together can be very intense. Luckily for you, because of that configuration, it's not overwhelmingly intense like it could be for some people. Um, but basically, you have a way of being able to probe beneath superficial appearances or things. You have a really keen, strong intuition of when something doesn't feel right, like something's just off. Now, one of the issues is because of your moon is that sometimes if you get into that detached mode when you're like, I'm turning off the emotions, unfortunately, when you do that, you're turning off your intuition too. So that's just a side note of something that, like, if you want your intuition, unfortunately, you have to feel and process the emotions. But you have really super incredible powers of concentration. You have a really penetrating mind. You can go really deep, which again doesn't surprise me that you and Trent are friends because he has so much Sag. And gosh, can they be philosophical? It's out the wazoo. And you love that in people. You love people who can get really deep with you. So for you on a mental level, it's very sexy for you when somebody can get really deep with you. So you're super observant of people. You're probably someone that has a really good quote unquote radar of others. Like you can just pick it out and be like, yeah, they're this, they're that, they're that. But unfortunately, like we said with that South Node in Virgo we were talking about, like we have to try not to judge, but you can definitely, you've probably been right about it so many times in your life that it's hard not to use that. But we have to try to give people the benefit of the doubt. I know that's hard. um, but so this typically is a good aspect for people who do become psychologists, counselors, therapists. So I know, Trent said that you were an artist. So some people with this particular planet chart configuration that you have, like if someone has a similar chart, I would say, have you thought about becoming an art therapist? Because that would be a really good. It's a field that isn't pursued very often. So with the Aquarius on the midheaven, right, like doing something outside of the norm, therapy and like psychotherapy in general is like as a field is becoming massively huge, especially now with COVID. People are valuing therapy so much, and you have planets in the eighth, and where a lot of therapy also is associated with that eighth house energy. So you could realistically help other people process their emotions through art therapy. Just something to think about. If that's ever something you thought about, it's never too late. But you may also have a really good career doing, occult type metaphysical services as well as your art. So because of that probing mind, you can see it's almost like an energy read. You can read beyond just what's in front of you. So that's a really cool little gift that you have there. And let's talk about Venus quick. So the reason why Venus is a very important planet, Mercury is a very important planet in your chart, but Venus is very important because a lot of your planetary energy comes back to Venus. So Venus runs a lot of the show behind the scenes because Venus is in her domicile, which means Venus is she's very happy in Libra. Okay, that's her girl, So with it being in the sixth house, what this tells me is, and with your Mars in the 11th, your love languages are more than likely acts of service as well as quality time. So for you, when you really care about someone and are devoted to them, you'll serve them. We talked a lot about this word service already. It's something you do intrinsically, but this could also be just by doing little favors. For instance, my husband, who's sitting across the room, he does this thing where he'll remember or he'll write it in his phone, like an order I did at a restaurant, like the first time we'll go. So he always remembers what to get me from that place if he's going and getting something. Little things like that. You probably have a good memory about those types of things. And especially with your art, you may offer gifts of your art as a love language as well. But you enjoy the things that are of beauty and pleasure and that make others happy. So again, going back to that Jupiter energy of like, you really really the way you express yourself and how people's impression is of you is that I want to make people happy. I want to make people feel comfortable. I want to expand their mind. I want to show them something beautiful, right? With the Venus. And emotionally that fulfills you too. So it's very interesting because a lot of people will be like, go towards the sun, go towards the sun. That's what a lot of astrologers tell you. But that moon, Venus, Jupiter thing we've got going on here is pretty good as well. So if someone feeds you that rhetoric a lot, you don't have to focus on it as much as you would think. But the moon trine that again just makes it to where you really love to make others feel loved and cherished and happy. It could be also looking at this, your mother could have been a very loving person, someone that you care a lot about, but either the detachment with your mother comes from like a difference of ideas, or it could come from your mother pushing you towards something better, or because the ruler of your moon is in the eighth, it could be your mom's like was sick in some way, to where you care for her, but you're not attached or you don't idealize her. So, but the moon trine Venus could be that you had a good relationship with your mother to some extent, because the moon typically represents the mother. A couple of my friends, the moon represents their father. It can get very tricky with gender roles these this day and age. But that's what I want to say about Venus. I don't think I have much else to say about Venus. So, and then let's get into Mars really quick. So we talked a lot about this idea of service, right? This idea of, to be honest with you, Ashley, a lot of your world is wrapped up in other people. And that's very common for people that have a lot of planets on this right side of the chart. We call this like the reaping chart. So you're somebody where a lot of fate, a lot of open doors happen through other people. And I think, with you having this low about immutable, like you want to be a leader for them. So that's where the service comes in. You enjoy people, but like you don't feel comfortable being around people or having people in your life unless you're doing things for them. So we have to kind of make sure that we're keeping that in balance. And how you're keeping that in balance is just your overall emotional regulation, right? If you find yourself having to pull the Aquarius, like flip the switch off, like it's almost, think of it like a breaker in a house, right? So if you're having to like constantly go to the breaker and like throw everything off and turn it back on, like that's how we know we're doing too much of the service stuff and we're not doing enough of like Ashley, right? But the point is that you're always wanting to do things and do them right and do them well and fiercely, right? And again, like I said, it was really nice with this Jupiter here because you really are talented. Like this is, and I don't say this to everybody, like this is one of those things where you're just blessed, where like typically when you do something, you can do it right the first time and you get better with it over time. Like it's a really nice placement to have. But that Mars in Aries has probably gotten you in trouble with authority a few times, because it is not friends with the Saturn over here. But you can be competitive when pursuing things you want. But overall, it just brings a lot of enthusiasm. But again, when we're talking about this act of service, you can't tolerate when you're in a group or your friends being the passive friend, right? You always got to be that friend that cheerleads people on or gives them that idea to go out and like pioneer something new, or like you're that friend that will try to boost people up. Like I think because the North Node is in here too, which is why I'm talking about this. I feel it's important, is because you need to feel like a leader within the group in order to feel recognized or valued. And so again, but the Pisces is like, we have to remove the idea of our preconceived notions. We have to remove the idea of it having to be the way you want it to be. But the point is that you also can sometimes lose interest in things quickly if they're not panning out the way you want with that Mars in Aries, okay? Because you desire to do things fiercely and strongly, and if things are kind of just meandering or they feel stagnant, you can get impatient, go, whatever, I don't want to do it, right? So, but you are a team player, you collaborate well, you're really good at making friends, I'm sure. I think one of the issues, though, if we're going back to the Saturn, is you're a hard worker and you'll continue to work through something even if you have some difficulties. Um, but you may often feel like you wonder if the work is worth it. And it may cause that rebellious spirit of you to want to rebel against something, especially if you feel like that particular thing is a stringent old thought that isn't servicing people. And it's very hard for you from your perception to perceive, is it an old, like useless, outdated thing that isn't needed anymore? Or is it something that is needed? It just, you need more time to adjust. So you may be met with resistance if you try to assert yourself too much. And in the realm of friendships, that may cause some people to not want to be around you, or that can cause for like you to want to just drop people, right? Like if you try to assert yourself because you're trying to help them, someone may not receive it that way, and you may get met with some resistance. And then you may be like, well, oh well, like deuces, and like, and the Gemini may be like, well, I guess they just couldn't handle my personality, or so I mean it's a difficult thing to deal with. But the problem, I think, for you, what you may feel frustrated with is that resistance that you get met with when you activate that Mars. You may not know where exactly it comes from. You may not understand like why you're being met with resistance. And I think that's just usually because you're pushing against someone's boundary or limitation, and they're telling you it's too much. So, and because that Saturn is in the eighth house deals a lot with mental health. So that's one thing to watch out for, is that when you're interacting and servicing people and getting out there and wanting to give yourself, even though that Venus saves you a lot, right? That Venus is very helpful. But, if you find that happening, just try to remind yourself that, okay, they may have, their own issues or experiences or traumas that they've been through. And whatever I'm doing is poking at that sore spot, and I should just be respectful and back off. So that's one thing I wanted to note there. But, when it comes to authority, as far as like work, right, this workaholic nature that you can have, it might be that authority figure or that superior is somewhat scared of your talent and your ambition and your leadership. So, I mean, it can come from a few different things, why you may get that resistance. But you also have Mars square Uranus, which makes you dynamic, energetic, always ready to go. When you want something, you go for it now. It's never a matter of like holding back. Honest to goodness, Ashley, if you didn't have that Venus and that Gemini, like luckily you're just so effervescent and just you have the social platitudes. But if you didn't, like that Mars Uranus energy would be difficult for others to deal with and for you to deal with, right? Because I don't think your intention is ever to rub people the wrong way. I just feel like you want to freely and fiercely be independent, and you're super self-willed. But again, that disregard for authority, that rebellious nature, it makes it hard for people to see how much you want to give yourself in a collaborative, cooperative manner. People may not know exactly your agenda or where you're coming from. But at the same time, you can clock them and you can read them for filth because of that, that Mercury Pluto. So it's a really interesting, you have a certain set of skills that create a very interesting, investigative, observant person that's really dynamic. It's not common, this type of chart outlay. You can also be really frank, which again, makes sense why you get on real well with Sagittarius people. But overall, you have a lot of energy, and it's all about focusing it. So it's important to try to be aware of your interactions. Ooh, sorry. You heard the scratch. To be aware of your interactions with people and how you're being perceived, because like I said at the very beginning of the reading, you may get a lot of people in life that are like, I really, what I got when I first met you, holy cow, is totally different than like who you are. Um, some people may think that really strongly. Some people may think it's not, for the most part, they got what they wanted, but there's a little surprises there. But I think for the most part, people would be surprised to hear, to see some of these aspects of you. So I think the important thing is in a group is to be really direct, or with your friends, be really direct of who you are, knowing who you are and knowing your work type, and you're letting people know up front how dynamic you are. And that kind of helps a lot. Because I mean, at the same time, you can't truly, if someone has a boundary, but they don't tell you they have a boundary, it's hard for you and your Mars to know that you're pushing it. So, but just some things I've noticed about your chart so that you can, if you're like, gosh, I have that problem and I'm still dealing with it. Now that you're, because you're 32 now, now that you're in your 30s, you might not deal with that Mars as much. I find the squares tend to get a lot better after the age of 30. But that one you might still be dealing with a little bit. So, okay, so let's go ahead and get into the solar return you had previously. Now, typically I would ask you where you're currently residing, but using it from your birthplace is also a viable way. So this is from November of this year to November of 2021. So this is the year outlook, okay? And what I usually do when I do solar returns, I'm not going to do a full one. I'm just going to kind of look and see, like, if I see anything that looks interesting. So, again, we know that you have 2 fire, 2 earth, 3 air, 3 water, 4 cardinal, 4 fixed, 2 mutable. So this year for a solar return, look, I've got a ton of cardinal, still not a lot of mutable, and just 1 less point in fixed. But look how the air went, okay? So this year might feel a little uncomfortable for you. You still got a good amount of water, so that's great. And a lot of those points went into earth, as well as the ascendant. So you technically have 5 points in earth. Just like technically here you had 4 points in air because there's a 1 point for the ascendant, okay? So this year it's all about grounding yourself. I wanted to say grounding the fuck down, but that didn't make sense. But like the point is that like you're really trying to like, I think after COVID and the Saturn return a couple years ago, you're just kind of like, I just need to fucking sit still for a minute, right? So it's like normally, and I think the reason you're wanting the stillness with the 5 cardinal is like, I feel like I haven't been able to do my plan, quote unquote, my plan. I have this plan that I want to do. I have all these things I want to do. And, nothing's been going right. And I want everything to slow down so I can take a breath and then do the plan. So you just have all these planets here in the first, okay? And it's in Capricorn. So we're trying to adult. We're trying to, you're trying to establish yourself as some kind of authority. A lot of times when people get Capricorn on the ascendant and a solar return, they typically want to start some sort of like quote unquote adult activity. So a lot of times this can be like working on your budget, starting a business, buying a home, getting married. Okay. So like the Capricorn could be saying a couple things of like, I'm getting older, like, and, trying to tell me you're single. So like, I'm going to find somebody, or like, I just need to get my ish together because like, my bank account is like crazy low and I'm not making enough money. And so like a lot of this, a lot of what you want to work on this year is just kind of adulting. You want to adult a little bit. And you're coming into 2021 and into this great conjunction of like trying to make some big changes with Pluto here, right? You're really wanting to make big changes. Like there's something right now actually in your life where you're like, I'm just done. There's something about your life within the past year or 2 years, you're like, I'm so done with that. And it could be, with your Saturn return, it could have been something from your past, some subconscious thoughts that you fight with, or like your mental health. It could be doubting yourself, or like you might have a really bad inner critic, right? With Saturn in the 8th. So like, especially with the South Node on Virgo, right? Like you might have a really bad inner critic and you're like, that Pluto on the on there. It's just like, look, I'm done. Like, and all these planets are going to be going out of Capricorn, and they're going to go into Aquarius, and it's going to get a little bit better with that. So I think that, with the sun in the 10th and the North Node in the 6th, I think what is on your mind is your career, right? Like trying to find something that brings you fulfillment and meaning, something you can be passionate about and chase, fearlessly, because you have such a big, dynamic, gregarious personality that for you to do things subtly makes it feel like someone's chaining you down. So in a way, I think you're sort of begrudgingly taking on the Capricorn rising. And the sun in the 10th is definitely telling me that there's going to be some major career changes this year. This could be the plan, quote unquote. This could be letting go of the plan. It could be, instead of having a big plan, North Node in the 6th, of having little plans through it, like taking it one day at a time, but still having some structure, but just there doesn't have to be this big plan. But typically Capricorn people do like to have a plan. Saturn on the 1st, you're wanting to do a lot of self-improvement, but Jupiter on the 1st is you're also wanting to chase your dreams. You also are having a Venus return this year. So this could be, what degree was it at? 21? Yeah, basically a Venus return. So this could be some love stuff happening. This could also be you feel that you're lacking a skill that you have to go back to school for, with Mercury in the 9th. Okay, so it could be you feel like right now you're struggling because your art isn't enough, and that you want to do something with that creativity that you have and your art, but you don't know how to do it. But overall, the moon in Sag in the 11th is a great sign. You're also going to have Mars return too. Wow, that's pretty incredible. So, I mean, even though you're going to be uncomfortable from the lack of air, it could be that you need to be a little more subjective in order to get to that place where you're starting to prioritize yourself, because you do have a lot of stuff in your chart where you prioritize other people. The one thing I'll warn you about with this chart is that you have a lot of planets now on the sowing side. Okay, so this is a lot of like you having to do the work for yourself. I think a lot of these changes are going to come from you accessing the North Node in the 6th in Gemini, which is changing your day-to-day routine. And you might also just have to you could be, because you have, Ashley, like these 3 planets in Scorpio, you may work in a dead-end job that you hate. Like there's really no reason to be attached to it, but you formed attachments and loyalties to coworkers and friends, right? Because Venus in the 6th can mean you can make friends easily with your coworkers. You get fulfillment out of work, but it's not giving you the fulfillment, like the life fulfillment, right? You're not feeling like you're really achieving what you need to achieve in this dead-end job that you're in. So it could be that the North Node is like, your goal is to figure it out, right? And bring some balance. So with like Gemini, right? So your goal is to look into some resources or get some other ideas from other people in your life of like, okay, what do you think I'd be good at? Because I mean, having other people in your life is good, and living for other people isn't a terrible thing, but utilize that in a way where it's helpful, not just because like, oh, well, I just, I want people in my life so I can serve them. Like allow them to help you and bring you some ideas of like what you could be doing. It could be for a short time this year you work 2 jobs. I don't know how that would work out, but a lot of times I see this Capricorn rising, like if you were planning to start a business or a side hustle that you may eventually want to turn into a business, it may be that you work your regular job but work less hours, and then you start your little side hustle and start like sawing off things like that. Now you could already be doing this, and I could be late to the game. I could be late to the party on that one. But if that's the case, I think you'll keep doing that and be more intentional with it, if that makes sense. Or at least like have more success, if that makes sense. So, but let's see, looking at, Pluto in the 1st as well also deals a lot with relationship and power dynamics. And I'm seeing Venus here is squaring all these planets here in the first. So you may have a lot of your relationships that have been stagnant or haven't been serving you as well, not just you serving them. You might find yourself confronting a lot of these and coming face to face with certain friends you have in your life or certain family members that are problematic, and really assessing your strength and power in that relationship and whether that does coincide with where you want to go in life or not, because it may not, and that's totally cool. Like, and it's okay to either have them pull back or back away from them, or to cut them off altogether. Because I mean, a lot of Capricorn rising too is like cutting the fat of your life. There's gonna be a lot of like cutting crap you don't need, and focusing on you and your own dreams and ambitions. So let's see with this last thing. Okay, so let's look at the transits. So I'm gonna pop this baby over top. So this outer circle here are where the planets are right now, and then your inner circle is your birth chart that we've been looking at. So the Great Conjunction just happened yesterday. So in fact, I'll just go ahead and I will move this back a day. Okay. So there it is. I don't know why I was looking at these. So stupid. Okay. So as you can see, look, almost exact as to right now. So within a minute of each other conjunct right here. And in your chart, you have Aquarius on the midheaven. So you have Jupiter and Saturn here right behind, but it's so close. Remember how I was talking about your Jupiter, that basically when it gets so close, it goes into the next house practically. So that's what's happening. So you're expanding your ambition in your career sector of your life, but you're also developing more structure and authority. So this great conjunction, so if you felt stuck in your career or like your life path, what you're supposed to be doing, like these two planets right here conjuncting each other on your midheaven is basically like unlocking all of these doors and just opening the floodgates for like, I know what to do, and I have all these ideas now, and I know exactly what I need to study, and I can come up with a plan. And it's like, it's an exciting way to chase that. This isn't something where this particular Saturn-Pluto conjunction, it's been 200 years since we've had this particular one in the air signs. So, I mean, this is a pretty big deal, and it gets to happen right on your midheaven. Like, that's really exciting. There's only so many people that it's happening in this way too. So I think with the Pluto also has been going through the ninth for a long time for you. Just a lot of gathering the information and like strengthening it and building upon it and really polishing it. So, and the information can be actual information, or it can be information that translates to a skill. So I do really think that it being in your career sector, this isn't going to just help you with your career. A lot of times this helps with relationships as well, because the 10th house is your status, right? So if your status has been single, then the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction is opening that doorway for that status to change. Like, and so it's a pretty incredible place to have this. I know there are many people that probably wish that they were having it on their midheaven. And so you've been having Mars going through the 12th. So you may have been experiencing low energy lately. I know I have. Mars going through Aries is also in my 12th. And so that's a very difficult one to deal with. Uranus, which is a planet that you tend to get on pretty well with, but it's kind of been sitting in your 12th for a while, and it will still sit in your 12th. But a lot of these changes that you're looking to make are subconscious, which I think is even more effective sometimes than having them be conscious things that you do, out in the world. Because a lot of people do things consciously, but they don't address the subconscious. So the Uranus is it's going to trip you up for a little while, but you may find yourself being restless, tired but restless. So once this Once Mars just gets into Taurus, it's going to feel a little bit better. Like you're still going to feel tired, but not restless as much. But especially once the Mars gets to your ascendant again, you're going to start feeling a lot better. So I'm just letting you know that if you feel like the pandemic's been kicking your ass, that's why. But look, so transiting Venus is going through the 7th as well. Look at that. And it is it's been semi-sextile this, so it's giving a little nudge, there's a little spark that could ignite there. What we call this is big bells, which this is a big bell right here, and this is a little bell. Okay, so if you're interested in love, I would suggest, hopping on that dating app or trying to get set up through friends or something, because you've got some good windows open here right now. Also, you have transiting the part of fortune as of the chart yesterday was in the 5th, so this is also the dating realm of things. And then you've got Mercury, Sun going through the 8th, but this will only happen for the next 30-40 days or so. So you may find yourself needing more rest, or you being more irritable, or feeling like the inner critic might kick up again if that's a thing for you. So that will be a shorter transit. But overall, it's important to just make note of the Saturn, Jupiter on the midheaven. It will feel very liberating. It may not feel like that right now because they're at 0 degrees, but it's ignited something big. And that big bell, like that, the sound waves from that bell go off for a long time. So I think that covers a lot of what I wanted to cover without making you fall asleep. So if this was helpful, or left you any imparting advice or any ideas, definitely feel free to email me. I'll make sure that Trent gives that to you, or I'll leave it in the bio section of this video. And if you really liked it, be sure to leave a review on my Facebook page. I always give everyone a return 20% off, a 20% off coupon when they review my page. So if you want to do that and we could do a follow-up, that would also be awesome. So thanks, Ashley, so much. Merry Christmas. And I hope I'll get to speak with you soon. Okay, bye.